Hello. Ooh, bit loud. Hello. Well, thank you for coming, those of you who have made it. I know I'm up against one of the biggest ones, so thank you for the guys that have actually arrived today. Um, I've got a little short presentation entitled 11 Years of Volunteer. So just to sort this out, I am a member of the volunteers for EVE. Um, Unlike a lot of people that may be doing presentations today, they might be telling you who they are, who they fly with, anything like that. But unfortunately, I'm not allowed to tell you anything like that. I've actually been playing EVE for about 15 years now, which, when thinking back of it, is an incredible amount of time. And in that amount of time, I've pretty much done it all. So, mined, missions, being a pirate, taking part of the largest fleet fights in the game. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. The reason being is because 11 years ago, I signed an NDA with CCP, which meant that I was going to be volunteering with their ISD program. And there's my character. I like to think that I've got the scowly face properly set up to show how I feel when I'm volunteering for this game. But what exactly is the ISD program? So for a lot of people, the ISDs are one singular entity. So depending on what type of thing you do in the game, you might see us as one thing. So for those the guys who do things on the forums, you might believe that we're all forum moderators who want to stamp down on any fun that any guys are having. For those of you that want to go in-game and try and spam up the help channels with your contracts and your recruitment scams and things like that, you might see us as the big mean people who come and stomp down on you. But in actual fact, there are multiple programs within the ISD, different teams essentially. So just thought I would break down a few details about what the different teams are. So first of all, we've got ICADE. We've all got weird names, unfortunately, but these guys are essentially our bug hunters. So when I was putting this slide together, I went out to all the different teams because I didn't want to misrepresent people. So I asked them to kind of give me some facts and figures about themselves. So these have all been done. And when I was putting this one together, it was actually CCP Goliath, who is the QA director. He basically took that and said, no, I want to do this because these guys are my babies, essentially. So these are his words and what he said. So what these guys do is they will maintain and process bug reports sent by the players. So anytime that you guys come across something in game that's not acting quite right, fingers crossed, you should file a bug report. These are the guys that look at it. And then this is Goliath's words. He says they'll act as a force multiplier for the EVE QA in reproducing all types of bugs and exploits. Not 100% sure what that means, but he was really passionate about that, so I thought I'd mention it. So yeah, these guys are live and breathe with the QA department, essentially. So they also gather information about the different types of bugs and document them, and you can mostly find them on the test server. These are the guys, if you've ever seen the cockroach, these are the guys who fly these. So yeah, very important for the QA team. They basically keep EVE as running as best it can do. And then we've also got the LOC team. So LOC essentially are the translators in EVE. So some of the feedback that CCP has had over the past decade or two is that some of the translations that they come out with can sometimes be a bit wonky. So they've tried to sort these things out by producing a team. So these are actually the newest team that work with the ISD. And at the moment, they are looking at just outside of the game things. So they are there for translating patch notes and dev blogs. They're mainly looking at those, but they're trying to move into the fiction department, fiction portal, and they're mostly involved in Russian and German. Though what they do tell me is that they are desperately trying to expand into French. So if there's anyone out there who happens to be able to translate from English to French, shoot these guys an application because they'd be more than happy to take you. We've also got NEC, who are the New Eden correspondents. So these are the guys who were formed by the merging of two older ISD groups. If you can remember, we've got the Interstellar Correspondence and Mercury. So they've actually been merged together. So they are the ones that are wholly responsible for the fiction portal in-game. So this is where all the information about all the different things that are happening in the lore of EVE are kept. So these are like the masters of this kind of thing. They'll also be there for reporting any kind of player and lore news that's happening with EVE. So if you're having a massive fleet fight, you might have one of these guys drop in to have a look and see what's going along. They try desperately not to bump Titans because people do get kind of pissed off when that kind of stuff happens. So they're there for doing that kind of thing. And occasionally they'll help CCP when they're looking to do like ad hoc new projects. So, for example, they might be helping with writing descriptions for things. So some of the boring things in EVE that just have the one-line description, these are the guys trying to pad it out and basically add more life and more history to everything that's happening. And then we've got the CCL. So if any of you guys are forum guys, these are the guys you might be normally seeing. So they try and keep the forums on the straight as narrow as much as is physically possible in EVE. They're also the ones that look after community outreach, and one of the interesting things that they're currently doing, like we mentioned on some of the keynotes from today and earlier, is the community fittings program. So they're the kind of guys who are in charge of moderating that list, keeping it up to date, making sure all the information. So although this is run by CCP, it's actually been handed off to volunteers to make sure, are these fits sensible, are they legit, try and get them in game and so on. So they've recently pushed out the exploration Tech 1 frigates for all the different races, and as more people submit more fittings, they're going to be expanding on that essentially. But then there's also a fifth group, and the fifth group is STAR, Support Training and Resources, and this is my group, which is why they get their own slide and don't have to share. So what do we do in STAR? So we are the ones who are looking after new players. So you've seen, if you've been in the keynotes, you've been in any of the discussions that we've had today and yesterday, new players is a big focus at the moment with CCP. And we've always been doing this. We have always been looking after new players. We've been doing the best we can, and it's nice to see that CCP are actually trying to put in more focus on these, because this is what our group is all about. We've got such a wealth of resource of knowledge of running these things, because we can be found in the help channels where we try and moderate them as little as possible, but we do have to try and keep them on the straight and narrow. And we offer advice. So you'll find us flying around in those, just basically people come along, first day joining EVE, how do I shop web, things like that. We'll be trying to answer those questions and also get rid of the trolls and the scammers, because unfortunately this is EVE and we do have that kind of situation to deal with. We'll also be found sometimes floating around in new player systems. So we've got the Sexy Polaris frigate that you see there. So we kind of have our duties where we just jump into these systems, just try and drive some engagement, get people talking and local, because one thing that I certainly find is that a lot of people, when they join EVE, they kind of treat it like a single player experience. So there's all these chat channels that pop up that you have. Most people don't even interact with them, but what we find is the more you can get people to actually interact and talk and get out of that shell, the more likely they are to stick with the game. So one of the simplest things is we can do is we jump into the channels, we've got a different coloured text so we instantly stand out, and we just shout, how is everyone doing? How's everyone finding this, essentially? Some people ignore us, whatever. Some people do actually reply, and we actually try and drive some engagement that way. And we do find that these new players who react to us are more likely to stick with us, because they start to realize, oh, these little boxes and dots that are flying around are actually other players. They're not just parts of the scenery. So this is something we try and do. And we've also assisted CCP in the past when they are coming up with ways of iterating on the new player experience. So we'll try and offer advice and suggestions, because we've lived and breathed this. We've seen what kind of questions that new players come up with. So yeah, we'll try and give the as honest as feedback as we can. So in the past, when we've had big relaunches, we've all been diving onto the test server and we've like tried to break everything we've kind of said, oh, well, you've kind of made an assumption that a new player will know what you mean when you say fit a railgun with a charge, but maybe you should think about a new player's got no idea what those terms mean. It's that kind of stuff. So yeah, we try and offer as much information as we can. So there are a couple of other things that we do that don't really fit into the team structure. So going on at the moment, obviously we've got the Twitch stream for all the new the Vegas things. So we have guys who moderate the Twitch chat. This is a really thankless task, so I've been talking to them quite a bit today, and yeah, they are being run ragged with these things. So they do moderate the chat. They obviously try and keep people acting as normally as possible as it can be for Twitch, but they also run competitions and things. So people at CCP have offered certain like skins and plexes and things like that. So they actually run the competitions. They pick people and so on and so forth. So we've got no team that's completely set up for that because it's such an infrequent thing. There's volunteers who say, yeah, I can give a few hours here and there. We also have a winter roam, which is this opportunity for us to kind of let our hair down a little bit because there are some quite tight restrictions on what we can and can't do in game. So around winter, around Christmas time, we do have the opportunity when it's just like, yeah, here you go, here's 5,000 snowballs, here's a few frigates, just go out, spread some cheer to people. So it's just an opportunity for us to kind of get some drive, get people knowing about the ISD program, and also for us try and enjoy ourselves a little bit. And a few weeks ago, it was GM week, and we helped out with that quite a bit. And on the last day of GM week, there was a big roam that was operated. We padded out some of the numbers. So a lot of CCP and a lot of GMs took part in that, as did we. So you may have seen, if you were involved in any of that, you may have seen us ISD floating around. I spent most of my time taking these screenshots, which is probably why I was the first to die, unfortunately, but I was given the ship, so I didn't need to have to worry about it myself. And we were basically tasked with keeping CCP Falcon alive when he dropped in with an Erebus. And unfortunately, he then lost a 90BL Erebus, but not my fault. I was taking screenshots. So what actually drove me to decide to volunteer? So I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit, and why did I get into EVE in the first place? So this is all the way back in 2004, which, again, makes me feel kind of old. And at the time, in the UK, realistically, the only way you could get a Visa or a MasterCard is you had to get a credit card. So I was 18, got my first credit card, and I decided that I wanted to see what these online games were all about. And I did my research at the time, and I wanted a sci-fi game, because that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. I wanted a game with spaceships. I wanted a game with a publisher that I knew and trusted. So back in 2004, there was only one obvious choice, which was Westwood Games' Earth and Beyond. Now, most of you may not have heard of Westwood Games' Earth and Beyond, because around 2 months later, it was cancelled. It was sad, yes. But on the official forums, there was actually a program that was set up to move people over to EVE Online. So basically, they're offering extended trials for anybody who was disappointed that Earth and Beyond was gone, and did people want to try it? So this was an interesting one because it was sci-fi again, it was spaceships, it was this weird Icelandic developer which no one had ever heard of. It was like given 6 months to live. Still going strong. So I decided to give them a chance. And this was back in 2004. And when I first logged on to the game, this is what greeted me. So this is how the game looked in 2004. It was a game with unlimited potential, but hidden behind an absolutely incomprehensible UI. I mean, just look at it. One of the most interesting design decisions that I have ever seen is down here at the bottom, where you had high, medium, and low slots like you do at the moment, but you couldn't see them all at the same time. You had to toggle between seeing your high, your medium, and your low slots. So as you can imagine, if you're frantically in a fleet fight, it's bad enough at the moment, but back then you had to be toggling backwards and forwards to see what was happening. Yeah, who designed this? There was no tutorial to speak of. When you logged on, the best you would get would be, here's a fetch mission, go over there, bring this back, that's your tutorial done. Many years later, at one of the fan fests, former CCP Soundwave was asked a question about what was the tutorial like in EVE. And he gave a quote which has stuck with me many years since, and just to display it for you now. The tutorial was, welcome to EVE Online, here's a Rubik's Cube, go fuck yourself. And yeah, that is, to be fair, that's what it was like, joining EVE Online at the time. So, as you can imagine, 2004, I joined the game, didn't really have any support links at the time, so I did what most people did back then, and unfortunately what most people do back nowadays, is I gave up. But something about Eve stuck with me. So I continued to read articles, I continued to see what was being mentioned about the game. And one of the news articles at the time was saying that there was going to be a big expansion at the end of 2004, because back then there were two expansions a year. And this was going to be completely revamping the UI. It was going to give an area of space which people didn't really care about, a whole purpose to exist. And at the time, they launched an expansion video. And this is the first expansion video that I ever seen, and maybe you've not actually seen. But this is kind of what I was watching in 2004.
An old prophecy foretold of magnificent cities in the skies. It told of riches beyond dreams in uncharted heavens. A better place. A new home. A promised land. It is time to fulfill that prophecy. It is time for a new allegiance, a new power, a new world order. It is our time. The new empires are rising. The exodus has begun.
So yeah, EVE Online Exodus launched, and I decided to give the game another chance. Just watching it now, it is fun to see some of the ship models which no longer exist, like the caracals that are flying over and things like that. Again, making me feel really old. With hindsight, some of the decisions that were made by CCP at the time didn't quite work out as intended. For example, they were trying to get people to move out into nullsec by inventing player-owned starbases, but they also invented level 4 agents, which meant that everyone came back into high sec because you made more money there. So some questionable decisions at the time. But there was still a lot of optimism on there, and the UI was revamped. All the foundations that you know nowadays of the UI were brought out in EVE Online Exodus. Also, anyone on there who was seeing that GameSpy's quote about being the best graphics in 2003 may be a bit questionable, but then you compare it to what we were normally used to in 2003, and actually it's pretty good in comparison. So I started up the game again, rolled a new character, got to work doing what most people did back then, mined. So I got myself a Bantam and I started mining. And yes, that is what a Bantam used to look like, and yes, a Bantam was used for mining back those. I still don't like it when people say a Bantam is a logistics frigate. No, it's a mining frigate. So I was treating the game, like I mentioned earlier, a bit of a solo experience. I was just going out, doing my business, returning to station, selling, repeat, and so on and so forth. And if I was stuck doing that, I probably would have given up after about a week. But one day, as I was sat there mining, I was contacted by a random pop-up about a guy just wanting to see, oh, how's that Bantam treating you? Are you enjoying mining? And it was a bit of an unusual thing at the time because some guy was just contacting me completely out of the blue. And then he asked me if I wanted to join his corporation. And I didn't really have a lot to lose at the time. I didn't really have any other links in or out of the game. So I thought, why not? What's I got to lose? And it was the best decision I made because suddenly, by being part of a group of people, made the game so much more fun and just expanded the options that were available. what they were doing, this corporation at the time, is they were seeding the market with ships and fits essentially for certain private play sets. So we had some people saying the mining frigates, some of the combat ships, and so on. They were looking to see who was actually buying those, looking at the people, seeing if it was a new player, and then contacting them essentially just to see what they were doing. So they were meeting and greeting players to the game using the abilities that they had as an in-player corporation. And that always stuck with me, that these people were going out of their way to try and find people and bring them into the game. And it's always stuck me that the players themselves have always wanted to do that. We know, obviously, the big corporations. We've got Eve University, we've got all the other ones who are devoted to new players. And there's a few people who are a bit elitist about it. Oh, we don't want new players or anything like that. We're happy being a bit of vets. But there's still a lot of people that actually want to bring new players to the game. And so within a year or so, I was within that corporation, I was completely in charge of new players. I was trying to get people to join the game and do what I could with it. And once they were in the game, trying to make sure that they stuck with us. And one thing that's always struck with me is that there's always one thing which was the best way of getting a new player to stick with the game. And that was to engage in combat. Win or lose, anyone who got involved in combat would be far more likely to stick with us. And I don't know about you, but even to this day, playing the game, when I've got something on the line, something that I've put blood, sweat, and tears into, when there's a chance it can lose, heart starts pounding, your pulse quickens, your hair stands on end. No other game carries that kind of experience to me. And that feeling is what you get new players to experience. Once they got that taste of combat, they're far more likely to stick with the game, in my experience. So how does that then transition into becoming a volunteer? Well, a few years later, I was just flying around HiSec, as you do, and there was just this person talking in local, flying a Raven, in a different coloured chat. So I'd never really gone on the forums, I didn't hang out on there, I didn't really see the help channels or anything like that. So the fact that someone was talking in a different text colour instantly stood out with me. And this guy in this Raven was saying that he was a police person, basically, police officer, who wanted to test his ship's tank. He wanted somebody to just randomly come up to him and shoot his ship to see if it could survive. Now, I'd been playing Eve for some time at this point. I knew. Random guy you'd never heard of before, no war, just wanted to come and let him shoot him. And this was before there was any kind of safety system or anything like that. So I knew exactly what this was going to be. Clearly, it was going to be some sort of trap. But funnily enough, it wasn't. This actually was one of the volunteers in the old Aurora team, and these were the guns who were the in-player actors, essentially. So for various reasons we shan't go into at the moment, that team no longer exists, but what they were doing is they were going into the game, basically coming up with the storyline, coming up with some sort of fiction, and just trying to get people to engage, like I was saying earlier in the local channels. So this guy was flying around and just essentially trying to see who could shoot me, who could kill my tank, and there was going to be some sort of prize on there. So this was my first experience with a volunteer. So I started to look into them a bit more. And I found out that there was a team who were purely focused on the new player experience. And as I said, that was always something that's been passionate of me. I wanted to see how I could actually put some of this passion, actually kind of give it back to the game. So went on their website and I stuck myself an application in. It was one boring night at work. Hopefully my boss isn't going to watch this because I was just sat there by myself late one night, so I put an application in on their website. And then I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. An entire year went by. We've never been best at applications. I will hold my hands up for that. But yeah, an entire year went by before I actually heard anything back from this. But I never logged onto the website. I never rescinded my application. So just one day, completely out of the blue, I received a mail inviting me, we were interested in what your application said. Would you like to come over for an interview? So each of the teams are responsible in how they want to recruit people. And the star team, what they wanted to do is they wanted to see how you could react to a new player who knew nothing. And they found that the best way of doing this was by pretending to be a new player who knew nothing. So they gave you their connection details for an IRC server. You jumped on, and then one of the experienced members would pretend to basically know nothing, and they wanted to see how you could cope with that. Whether you're someone that screamed and had a tantrum and pulled their hair out and ran off, or were someone who actually tried to be calm about the matter and basically try and talk this person round. And trust me, when these guys were playing dumb, they were experts at playing dumb. So went through with that, finished it, logged off, thought that'll be the end of it. But no, I got a mail a few weeks later inviting me, do I actually want to join the group? And I did. And that's where I stand now. So that was actually 11 years ago now. So what else have I done? So I've got up to a few different things in my time. One of the big things that I said that we do is we have to moderate the help channels. So one particular evening, one of the more junior members of the team basically contacted me out of game, sent me a ping and said, I really need some help here. The help channels have gone absolutely insane. Logged on, and then the English help channel was basically running a mile a minute, just the same spam, running through it. And I had no idea what was going on with it. It turns out that a couple of guys in Test Alliance at the time went and decided that they should start spamming up the Jita Local. Now, Jita Local was one of those terrible channels, but it's nothing to do with us. We don't care what happens. It's not one of the official help channels. The GMs care, but not us. So they were doing their best to spam it up and basically gum up the works. And one of the GMs contacted them and said, look, can you please just cease and desist this in all the official channels? Except the GM mistyped and didn't put seize, he put, can you seize the official help channels? So Test Alliance obviously saw this as a honest typo and they knew not to do anything. No. They decided to seize all the official help channels. So I logged on and there was about 4,500 test people putting the same thing, saying under instructions of GM so-and-so, we are seizing this channel. Now, normally, our system is set up so that we can mute one person at a time, because that's normally all we have to deal with. There's about 4,500 people doing this. So this would have taken about a week to do by hand. So digging into the system, I saw there was an option for where you put the name of the character. There's also an option for the name of the corporation. There's actually also an option for the name of the alliance. Now, we'd never tested this system because we never needed to mute an entire alliance in one go, but I thought it'd be quicker than doing it any other way. So I put test alliance in, click the button. Instantly, the help channel shuts down. Nothing is said. Apart from one random guy who was in a completely different alliance who just wants to jump on the bandwagon who posted it. And that person then got on mute. I got a lot of mails at that time for muting all those people. They weren't very happy with it. They sent me all sorts of things saying, oh, you're just a member of chat police, oh, it's all gone to your head. Those kind of things, unfortunately, do happen. Kind of water off a duck's back, you don't really care. But to this day, it means that I hold the highest moderation count for about 4,500 people, which I did in one afternoon. What else have I done? I've run seminars in EVE. So it was a program that we tried when we were working with CCP Falcon. And he wanted to basically come up with a way that we would be able to get people in the game to try and learn some of the harder subjects. So this was before we had the tutorial videos that we can link to. So we had things like exploration, crime watch, how to find friends, how to fleet mine, how to gang boost, things like that. So it was all very janky because one of the big restrictions that we had is that we have to do everything in game. So we had this kind of weird setup where we had 2 chat channels. We asked people to join both. One of them was locked down so only I could speak, and in the other one, people could ask questions, and it wasn't very good, but we were trying our best because we are trying to get this information out. So we actually then worked with EVE University and basically handed off some of the materials because being a player organisation, they've got less restrictions on what they can do. So they kind of took this program, ran with it, and it became the kind of lesson system that they've got. I've also done videos for EVE. I recorded a few. I did a few expansion overviews, basically aimed at new players. There was one particular time when a new expansion was coming out and we were heavily promoted on the launch screen. Basically, why don't you come along and see what these guys have to say? Unfortunately, about half an hour before we went live, Eve suffered one of the largest DDoS attacks it's ever had, and they had to take down every single server, both the main Tranquility and all the test servers. So essentially, I was just on a Twitch chat with absolutely nothing to show. And of course, people trying to log on, they couldn't log on to the game. All they could see was the advertisement for my Twitch channel. So I had a few hundred people joining, basically trying to say, why on earth is the game not working? What's going on? So that didn't go as well as it could have done. But mostly at this point in time, I am co-running the team. So I'm responsible for working with our liaisons at CCP who have an idea of how they want the team to run and focus. They are really hands-off in how they work with the program. So they have like an overall agenda which they want, but they're not going to be there minute by minute saying, oh, we need someone to log on and do this at 10 o'clock and they need to log on for half an hour or anything like that. It's all really hands-off. They've just got an overall focus, and they also look after any background checks that we need doing on prospective people. So I, with one other member, run the team essentially, basically keeping it working, making sure that we've got, we know what people are doing, trying to get new recruits and so on and so forth. But why do I actually do it after all this time? Because, honest to say, I must be one of the longest running volunteers now. There only is a couple of other people who've been running it since before there was a beta. And I think the answer to that is the same reason that most of you are still probably with the same alliances that you have been for a few years, why some of you are wearing the merchandise for the different corporations. It's because that sense of community, isn't it? It's the fact that you are with a bunch of people who have a shared goal and agenda, essentially. We always have a big showing at the Fan Fest. So there is one of the apartments that we hired from a few years ago. These are all the members. We put all badges and have a photo taken, because we try and make sure that when we do have a Fan Fest showing, all of us get together and basically have a bigger party, essentially. We've got ourselves an ISD flag, which is, for some bizarre reason, very prominently displayed on the official CCP FanFest page. I think the fact that we have a white flag while everyone else in EVE has a black flag probably helps, because it stands out a fair more than everyone else's. And we also have ourselves basically a big party. So whenever there's a big fan fest or Vegas or something similar like that, we try and get all the volunteers together. There's a photo from the one in Reykjavik, where that was laid on by CCP. They arranged for a few kegs for us, basically to say thank you. We make sure that there's no kegs given back, essentially. So we make sure we always drink them dry. But on a final note, you may have seen the other day when they were listing some of the stupid things in the new player tutorial. Well, peek behind the curtains, a lot of that came from the ISD team. We were contacted about 6 months ago by a few members of CCP saying, we need your help crowdsourcing as many of the issues as you guys can think of that you come across that could be fixed, probably with relatively dev time, but just like common things that come up with. So on that page, it was basically submit your suggestions. So I submitted a suggestion, which I think that all stations should have a repair bay. And the problem we had with that I put is that a new player logs on, they're informed, oh, to repair your ship, you dock up at a station, you right-click or whatever, and get a repair quote. Now, for some reason, some of the stations in HiSec don't actually have a repair bay. And to be able to find out which do and which don't, it's buried by 20 pages of a map, essentially. So my suggestion was, well, we've got citadels that repair you. We've got one stations with UV. I can't really see a legitimate game reason why all stations shouldn't have a repair bay. So I put that on there. And then a few weeks later, in one of the patch notes, I noticed a line appear. Miscellaneous repair services will now be available at all HiSec stations. So no one ever contacted me. I have absolutely no idea whether anyone actually read my suggestion to come up with that, but I choose to believe that they did. And I think now, after 11 years of being a volunteer, I can officially call myself a developer of EVE Online. Thank you very much. I believe we've got some time for any questions, if there are any. If anyone has any questions at the microphone at the front there. Volunteering process, yeah, go for it.
No, answer the question. Because the part where you said it took you a year.
Yep. Yeah, so the way it was always working within the ISD is that they would do it as recruitment drives. So rather than having one or two players join randomly and spaced out throughout a year, they were trying to get new players to join in big jumps, essentially. So it made it easier for training the new players, essentially. Now, one of the pieces of feedback, obviously, that you could give at the time is that for someone joining, they had no idea what was happening. They submit an application, and then it could have vanished into the infinite bin. It could be in someone's queue. You just had no feedback until someone mailed it. So that system where you applied was completely pulled, and CCP put a lot of dev time into a new website, essentially, where you can submit applications and you do get live feedback for them. So if anyone put an application in now, they will see it on the new website, which shows them exactly what stage they are. Now, the time it takes to go through, yes, generally that has got quicker. It's no longer around a year or so, but we still do things in the recruitment drive. So we still batch things up, say, every 6 months and then do a mass sweep through all the applications. But the critical thing is that everyone now they can online view their application and they know what exactly their stage that they've got to. So there is still some work to be done. I'll hold my hands up to that, but it is a lot better than it was when I applied 11 years ago. Which team did you apply for? Yeah. Go, anyone, sure.
So you mentioned when you joined as a volunteer, you had to change pretty much how you played EVE Online. Like you didn't get to play as much, I believe is what you said, or?
So when I joined up as the ISD, so essentially one of the big rules, and it's similar being a CCP developer, is that there can be no link between your player identity and your volunteer or developer identity. And the reason being is that they don't want any kind of bias or anything like that. Because if you were someone, say, for a forum moderator, and you muted someone in the forums and you knew them in game, instantly there's kind of bias. So it's not really changed the game. I still log on, I still play the game, but when I come to an event like this, for example, when we saw yesterday, like all the different alliances that came up, if my alliance was on there, I can't whoop and cheer with the rest of my alliance mates because I'm here representing ISD. So it's not really changed how I play the game, it just changes how I come to events like this.
So does that mean no voice comms either and all that?
It all depends. If you've got like a really obvious voice, then probably not. I sound like a standard Yorkshireman, I'll have you know. But no, normally that's not kind of a big restriction. What they'll normally say is that if you come to one of these events and you can choose. When I come to this, I can make a choice. If I come as a player, I come as a player and I can never tell anyone as ISD and I can't change my mind later. Or I can come as an ISD and that's my choice, but there's basically that distinction on there. And yeah, we do have some rules about what can be done, but it's not super restrictive, like you can't talk on comms or anything like that.
Okay, and then one more question. I know you've had a lot of interactions with new players. What is the one most memorable interaction that you've ever had with a new player?
So with new players, that's a good question. I think the one that instantly jumps to mind is when, I forget the name of the character, but he was really into roleplay. So when I started talking to this guy, he came along and basically said, "Yar, how you be doing? I want to be a pirate. How would you be a pirate?" I'm thinking, what is this guy on about? Trying to help him through, basically. He had some questions, but rather than asking any question in like a normal way, like, oh, what button on the UI does this? It'd be, "Yar, I'd be looking at my screen and I want to know how do I sell my booty on the market?" And it's like, okay, man, calm down a little bit. It's not, it's not pirates or whatever. So yeah, you come across some characters essentially. You come across obvious people who want to troll you, who want to get a rise out of you, and the easiest way of dealing with those is just ignore them and log off. But it's the earnest and the honest people who basically come to this game and they don't really know what's going on, and some people may have tried and tricked them in the past, and you're trying to help them, and these guys kind of stuck with you because it's the earnestness when they come basically and say, this guy, he said that he was going to give me twice as much ISK if I gave it him. So I gave it him, but he's not given me any ISK. What can I do? And you kind of have to, in the nicest possible way, and say, there's really nothing you can do because you chose to give this guy 10 million ISK. It was on your head, basically. But some people try and learn from that experience. Other people run screaming from the game. And I think that is something that CCP have to work on. So, yeah. Any other questions for me?
Okay, you talked about doing a core, you talked about doing ISD. It takes a lot of effort, especially if you're higher in the core. So you do 24 hours a day. So you see what you do.
Yeah.
Find that balance.
So, in terms of the question, so you're basically asking how do I strike a balance between playing the game and volunteering? Is that kind of the question that you're coming across? Yeah. So there's basically what they'll say is that they would like us to volunteer for around 6 hours a month. It's not a massive amount by any stretch of the imagination. That's the kind of thing you could do on a weekend if you really felt like it. So it's not super restrictive like, oh, you have a 9-to-5 job and you're volunteering. CCP understand that we are volunteers. We are aiding and assisting their other abilities. So they have GMs, they have developers who do a lot of the stuff. We are basically adding extra weight to that. So in terms of playing the game, essentially, if I have any downtime, so I've done something, there's been a big fleet fight, it's all been finished, but I've still got a few hours before I need to do anything with my daughter or anything like that. I think half an hour, I'll log on and do some volunteering. Each team has obviously different amounts of requirements that they have. I can only speak for my star team, but we are basically around 6 hours a month. So it is very reasonable to do that and still play the game, and most importantly, still have a life outside the game. It's a radio mic, go for it.
Okay. Let's see, where were we at? Where you were talking about PvP for the first time? All right, so you go into a rookie system, because that's where you're going to be picking them up, right? What about griefing in rookie systems?
So griefing in rookie systems is one of the few things that's pretty much instantly frowned upon. There is a list on basically the GM's webpage, the Evilopedia, where they would list the certain bannable offences, certain things that you cannot get away with. And on there it is basically taking advantage of a new player's inexperience in one of these certain systems. It lists all the rookie systems as well as a couple of systems for the Sisters of Eve Epic Arc. Arnon, I think, is one of them. So there's basically a few systems where it says you don't take advantage of them. Now, that's not saying that you can't PvP. If you were doing a normal war or something like that with someone and it happened to be one of those systems, absolutely fine. What the GMs do not like is people taking advantage of someone's inexperience. So you've got things like your can flipping or your logistics with Crime Watch or anything like that, and basically using this as an excuse to kill people. So if there is if there's instances like that, if we witness one of them, there's certain processes that we've got. If we're not around to follow them, it would be reported to the GMs as via a ticket. Now, one thing is that information obviously needs to be more visible. What CCP can do to make that more visible is up to them, unfortunately. But if anyone came to me and said, this so-and-so happened in Kisagawa or any of the other new player systems, it would be, yeah, ticket this because there is something that the GMs can do about it.
Okay, so for us, non-ISD, then it would be submit a
the same
help
situation.
ticket?
If you saw something like that, then either get the person that was involved or yourself can file a ticket with all the information, and the GMs will take action accordingly against the people and reimburse if required. Because it is on the website very specifically.
Trust
you
me,
can't
I
do
link
that.
that link quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I work help a lot.
Good.
By the way, Keith Eaton, wherever he's at, was an awesome person.
Yes, I know the guy.
Right, okay. You mentioned it, playing dumb trolls.
Yep.
CCP, you guys, or just somebody out trolling? And what's the best way to handle that? Because it is extremely, extremely frustrating. You're trying to help somebody legitimately, and you know that the veteran, because you can tell by the way they talk that they're a bitter vet,
Yes.
right?
It is one of those hard things, unfortunately. If someone is, it depends what they're doing. If someone is just basically trolling and trying to cause a ruckus, trying to cause a storm, there's certain ways we can try and talk that person around, try and talk them down. If it got so bad, we have the power of basically removing people from the channel, which we do. We look after the official help channels. There's Rookie Help channel. There's the language channels as well. If we something like that, we'll first of all try and talk them around the situation, try and basically get them to express what they're feeling in a more productive way, like go and blow someone up in low sec or something. But we will try and basically deal with the situation, and if they can't be dealt with, we will remove them from there. However, we don't all see everything that happens in the game, unfortunately. So if someone is legitimately trolling someone, unfortunately, it has to be a matter for the GMs, and they'll have to make a decision based on, is it just something someone said one time? Is it a legitimate campaign against that person, trying to drive them out of the game? And unfortunately, that is down to the GMs. We can only do what we see, essentially.
Okay, Rookie Channel has now been opened up. Anybody can go into it, and it usually floats at about jitta levels. 2,000 people, Rookie Channel.
Yes. That was one of the big
Good
things.
thing or bad thing?
When the
Just your opinion. That's all I'm looking for, is just your opinion.
when it official, just to give a bit of background, when the new channel system was integrated, there used to be a restriction that only a new player could join the Rookie Help channel or an ISD member. When the new chat channel system was brought in, they changed some of the things and they could no longer restrict it, so anyone can now join these channels. In some respects, it's a great thing because that means that players who don't want to volunteer permanently, they can just dive in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes and help people, essentially. But it has its disadvantages as well, because it used to be a system where it was just new players or essentially trying to get help. So it's a double-edged sword, like a lot of these things. If used correctly, it's it's a boon. If used wrong, it can be just used as a list for people to find messages to, find a list of names to mail for my CSM spam and things like that, which we've seen. So, yeah, in my opinion, it's probably a good thing in the long run, I would say. The fact that anyone can now join and help if they can.
And are you responsible for the blue pointer in help channels now?
The blue corner?
Yeah, the blue pointer. Drag it. Push that button.
Oh,
Push this.
yes. Love that system. Makes my life a lot easier. No, I'm not responsible for that. But yes, it is a massive
Since you're
boon.
responsible for that.
I'm responsible for that, definitely.
Okay.
But no, the pointer system was a great introduction by CCP because it meant rather than me saying, click the icon that looks a bit like a safe if you squint a bit or press Alt-T, you can now just click the UI and just say, go and point it here. So, yeah, made a massive boon. And I think that is it for time. So, yeah, thank you very much for spending the last hour with me.